So today we're going to talk about vocabulary instruction, and this is going to be a strategy that you can use to help your students dig deeper into the text, and it's ultimately going to help their writing become better, because the more vocabulary they know, the more style they are able to have when they write. So why teach vocabulary? Well, vocabulary is the currency of written language. These quotes both show that vocabulary is central when it comes to reading and writing. There has been a lot of research that's been done to document the role of vocabulary in school success, and particularly with reading comprehension, because if they understand the words that they're reading, they're going to understand it a lot better. Again, reading comprehension and vocabulary knowledge are strongly correlated. If they understand the vocabulary, they're going to understand the topic at hand. There was a study done that showed that first grade vocabulary predicted students' reading achievement in their junior year in high school. So even though vocabulary at those really young grades might not seem that important, it just keeps building upon itself. The more words they learn, the more it's going to impact their school career. And vocabulary plays an important role in word recognition. So the more vocabulary they know, the more they are going to be able to recognize a word that they might not know. So if you think back to when you were in school, how did you learn vocabulary? You might have had to memorize a list. Maybe you had a weekly test. You probably had to look up words in the dictionary, put words into sentences. You probably had a vocabulary book. And if you think back on it, how many of those words do you still remember? Odds are probably not that many. So vocabulary instruction needs to be purposeful, and it needs to work for your students. It needs to be explicit. So how do we increase student vocabulary? Well, you don't just want to give them a list and have them memorize it. You want to teach the words explicitly, which means you want to really specifically take a look at a word, break it apart, and put it in a format that students understand. So you want to promote active and in-depth processing. Maybe have the students help you come up with a definition for the word. You want to make connections between words they know and new words, and maybe relate those new words to experiences. You want to extend and refine and expand upon their knowledge of words that they already know. You want to provide multiple exposures to multiple contexts. So maybe you're going to use the same word over multiple units, or maybe the words being used in multiple classes. And you want to teach students to be strategic. So maybe helping them know the roots of the words will help them come up with definitions when they see the word again later. So this is sort of an outline for how to teach vocabulary in your classroom. You want to first introduce the word, and you want to write it, and you want to say it, and then have the students repeat it. I think one thing we just assume, well, they're in middle school, they can read. But if it's a word they don't know, they're not going to know if they're saying it incorrectly. So you want to be sure that you're saying the word and writing it out for them. You want to explain and teach the word explicitly. And again, this means to break the word apart and be very purposeful about how you explain it. So you might want to use a student-friendly explanation, use a student-friendly definition, show pictures, demonstrate it if it's a verb or a noun, give examples and non-examples, provide sentences with the word already in it so that the students understand the syntax, engage students in activities and elaboration, monitor their understanding. And then once you've taught the word, go back and look at it again, revisit the word over time, because the more you look at it and the more you have students engage with it, the better chance they have of remembering it. So what do students need to be able to do to learn word meanings? This is what students should be able to do independently when they're faced with a word they don't know. So they should be able to use the context. So they should be able to look at text structure, maybe background information, and language structure to help them figure out the word. And if we are explicitly teaching them how to do this, they will ultimately be able to do this on their own. So what do they already know? What's their background knowledge? What's the syntax of the sentence? Does the word fit with the meaning of the sentence? Go back and read it again with a new definition. We need to help them make connections between known words and word parts to help them figure out the meaning. So again, what's a word that I know that I could substitute for this word in the sentence to help me figure out what? What other ways are there for students to learn vocabulary? This is more on the student than it is the teacher, but independent reading and read alouds play a huge role in student vocabulary. You can see with the chart, the students that read less than a minute of time are only exposed to about 8,000 words a year, which seems like a lot until you compare it to reading 20 minutes a day. And now all of a sudden they've been exposed to over 1 million words a year. So something as simple as a read aloud or giving students time to independently read, reminding them to independently read and flex and nest is only going to improve their vocabulary. So I want to take a quick minute and caution you about using the dictionary. I know a lot of people say, hey, go look up the word in the dictionary, come up with a sentence that, uses the word. Dictionaries have to be used strategically. Students have to have some knowledge of the word for dictionary definition to make sense. They have to know how to use the dictionary in order to find the definition and have it make sense. The dictionary doesn't show how the word's different from other words. The language that the definition uses is super vague. There might be more than one definition, which makes it really hard to figure out which one is correct. And it doesn't give the students syntax. It doesn't give them structure. The part of speech is even hard to figure out when you don't have a sentence to sort of see the word in. So when you're using the dictionary, you want to make sure that students understand how to use a dictionary and also that they're understanding where that definition is coming from. So where and when should we teach vocabulary? You can use every opportunity you have to explicitly teach new vocabulary. It can be one-on-one with a student, it could be a small group, even just a read aloud. Cross-content areas can teach vocabulary specifically. So the more vocabulary your students know, the better their understanding of the vocabulary will ultimately support them when they go to write their Type 3.